So this is a chance for us to actually together reflect on all the layers that people heard about right now. And I want to start with you, because I know that you actually spent time looking at online dating. Yeah. You wrote an op-ed in defense of Tinder, where you try to argue not just for Tinder, but the idea of relationships and why online. I wasn't. And why is it important? So tell us what your lens is.
Yeah, I mean, so let's do just a very brief tour through the history of online dating. The Netscape Navigator comes out about early '95. Within minutes, Match.com launches. They pitch themselves as the supermarkets of love, right? These early sites, they don't pretend they have an algorithm. They say, check it out, there's hundreds or thousands of people. And they say, try to figure out who's compatible with you by browsing around. Fast forward to 2000, you get the second generation. This is eHarmony. And they are the real estate agents of love. They pitch themselves that way, and they say, the terrain is fraught, and you really can't be trusted to plow through these thousands of algorithms, thousands of profiles. Here's an algorithm, we have the truth, and we'll find the person for you. Now, both of those are flawed. We've done a lot of research on this. So the first problem is you can't tell from a profile who's compatible with you. People are irreducible, right? You can't get them down to a two-dimensional display. So the whole first generation approach is flawed. The second generation approach is reasonable, but those algorithms are bunk. They do not work. Where's the camera? Bunk. Those algorithms do not work, right? And so then you're left with, what can online dating do really well? It can get people to meet people they otherwise wouldn't have met. And Grindr was doing this as soon as the App Store came out, but it took a while. It took until Tinder in 2014 to give it to heterosexual people or women of any stripe, so far as I can tell. And so I am hugely enthusiastic about a system that doesn't claim you can tell who's compatible with you. They don't claim that their algorithm is magic. They say, how can we get people face to face? But I don't think that within the app space, I certainly wouldn't say that Tinder's a better option than Bumble. I think Bumble's a terrific option too.
Good. So let me ask you.
I paid him backstage to say that.
So let me ask you on the other extreme version of it. You have customer service on Bumble. What are the complaints people ask about? When people are not happy, what are they not happy about?
What are they unhappy about on Bumble? That's okay. Nothing. No, I'm joking. On Bumble, people, they'll complain about some people will complain about not getting matches, and it comes back to what you were talking about and the way that you curate your profile. I mean, that is your place to put your best foot forward, and that's what we say back is we oftentimes will have, our customer service team is unreal, and I'm so lucky to get to work with them every day, but we will go back and actually coach people on ways to curate a better profile. Also, it's very similar to what you were talking about as well. People will say they don't get offline, but you are in control of taking this conversation offline and starting a conversation with hi or like a waving hand emoji. While it is technically a first move, you should be using this as an opportunity to learn something about the other person, and the profile is the way to do that. So your bio can be short and funny if you like banter, or you can even ask a question in your bio that prompts a conversation. But everybody is looking, it's like you're saying you're scrolling through fast, you're seeing different profiles, but everybody is looking for somebody special and unique. And if you use your profile as that opportunity, that actually does help increase not only matches, but conversations and meeting offline.
So when you look at profiles, you actually see that ones that have more text or less text, more personal, less personal, smiling on it. What works?
I can tell you what I don't think works. I think you can use it as a tool, right? If you're traveling and wanting to meet people, that really applies a lot to BFF and Biz. You can say where you are and that you're there, and you can meet local people to show you around the city. But what I think doesn't work is to tell somebody what you don't want. I think that limits another person. So if you're on there and you're like, I'm not into drama and I'm not looking for this and you have to be this tall or whatever, I mean, you're limiting your options right off the bat, and you're displaying yourself as a negative person versus being open to opportunities and experiences meeting people. I also think that my biggest piece of advice for online dating is to put zero pressure on the relationship, because you never know if that person is going to introduce you to something as simple as music you've never heard, or that could be the person that actually links you to the person of your dreams. The opportunity is really limitless if you open yourself up to introductions.
Esther, you are now traveling the world and meeting a lot of people every day talking about your book. I was curious, what are the questions that keep coming again and again from people that you meet? What do people are concerned by? Like, what are the things that people don't know?
About the book?
About when you talk about the book, I mean, I assume about relationships.
About the book is why did you
I'm going to
write
ask you the same question in a second, so you have a little chance to.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it goes from why did you write a book about affairs? What do you think? Once a cheater, always a cheater? Can a broken trust ever be healed? The women question. The notion that by definition, how can you say, here's a big one, you say in your book that affairs can sometimes actually yield to a positive outcome. How is that possible? Isn't it the worst thing that can happen in a relationship? You say that in a relationship, betrayal comes in many forms. What do you mean? Things like that.
So I want to focus on one of them. When I read your book, there were a few very moving stories that you have there about types of affairs that aren't the ones that we have in mind right away. It's not the guy goes and meets a girl somewhere and hides it from his wife. There were people, for instance, whose spouse is sick, and they take care of them in the morning, and then they have an affair with the other person who takes care of someone else. When you talk to couples like that, which seem like the affair is maybe an outlet for something bigger, what is the advice that you give those people? People that the affair is...
So much of my advice is asking questions. I am not living with the consequences of people's choices they do. So I highly respect their own self-determination, but I'll guide them to that landscape. The story that Moran is referring to is that, yes, we have an enormous amount of quick ideas of what it is, who is the person who does this and what it's like. But in fact, it is, the landscape is very different and much more nuanced. There are 44 million people who are caregivers in America alone. A lot of these people care for an ill partner. And in my new podcast, I have people who are ill in their mid-30s. I mean, these are not even old people. And so I met this man who literally came up to me at the end of a talk and just said, is it still called cheating if your wife doesn't remember your name? He's in his 60s. You know, it's not an... I met another woman who also visits her partner every day on the floor, and we have found great comfort with each other. I don't think I have to give him advice. I just said, I understand how much energy and aliveness and vitality you draw from this new connection to go and take care of your wife. I'm sure your wife is so appreciative that you keep coming. Even if she doesn't know your name, she may still feel your presence.
This is a good chance to suggest, to talk about the fact that you mentioned it. You have a new podcast where you not just talk about cheating or relationship, you actually talk about very many ways of doing therapy with couples live. Can you tell us about this? How did it come about, and
so the number one public health problem at this point in America is loneliness. One of the many relationships that is intensely lonely is often the couple. Nobody really knows what goes on in the backstage of couples. I've been a couples therapist for 34 years, and I just thought, if they go on and they say, is this normal? Is this me? Do other people go through this? And I thought nobody has ever opened their office. Nobody's ever entered into this room where people talk raw, intimate, unscripted to each other. And I did not know what it was going to become. I just thought, I've known couples therapy. It's the best theater in town. You know, there is nothing that matches that intensity and that complexity and that drama. But it is also the most difficult form of therapy and often the most useless, honestly. So to change one person is hard enough. To change a system is always more difficult. And a couple is a system. And when we began to do the sessions, it transcended it. Because when you listen to the stories of others, you're actually finding the vocabulary that you've been looking for, and you're not anymore looking at them, you're actually standing in front of your own mirror. And so these stories become universal. They become actually stories, not just a session with a couple. And it's among the 20 top podcasts at this point on iTunes, and it just keeps going. It's been an amazing experience. 1,500 couples have applied in one season to be on it, from all over America. It's not a small pocket of people. Many of the people I saw in the last season have never been to New York. Foreigners will come to New York, but Americans haven't gone to New York. And I really think that the landscape of relationship today is more complex and more challenging than it ever was, because we have to make most of the decisions. They're no longer handed down by all the traditional institutions. And so anywhere I could help people navigate those challenges, this became an incredible tool.
I'm going to ask you the same question I started with Esther. What do people ask about marriage when you go talk to people about your book?
There's a wide range, and it's fun. I mean, a lot of people ask about inequality, which we touched on briefly before. A lot of people are curious about the idea that you can use the methods of science to study something like relationships. I think that's not an intuitive idea to people, and so they'll ask specifics. How would you go about running experimental studies with couples? I mean, you saw a couple examples here. People sometimes want to know about my marriage. How did I meet my wife? How's that going? Do I have the all marriage?
Have I had affairs?
Have I had affairs? Yes, with
She
Esther.
appears on the opening of the book as a...
Oh, yeah. So
to my wife, who still thinks it's a joke that I'm a marriage
yeah,
expert.
to my wife, Allison, who thinks it's hilarious that I'm a marriage expert.
Yes.
They ask you and they ask me about monogamy, non-monogamy,
Yeah, they
and
do.
polyamory. That's a question I also get a lot.
So my last question to the three of you, you can all chime in. You had a chance backstage to talk just before the panel, and we had a lot of time before talking to each other. Is there anything that you fundamentally disagree on? That is right now a topic that you say, I totally disagree with how Esther thinks about it, I totally disagree with Eli. Something that you really feel, because I know that Stephanie yesterday suggested that she has a different view on a relationship, and she immediately said yesterday, I think differently than I'm curious if the authorities on relationships, the people who spend a lot of time thinking about it, have fundamental topics that they say, we disagree on that, and there's two classes or two topics that people totally think differently. Each of you can take it, I don't know.
I can come up with one. I mean, I mean, if I must.
Yeah.
And you can be the third person who can tell them after 28 minutes if from the lens of a person who tries to help them if it's working.
Yeah. Right now, I'm thinking this is something I shouldn't say, which is why my wife thinks it's hilarious that I'm a marriage expert, because here I am saying it. So I am less down on hookup culture than I think, at least, I mean, I don't actually know if there's a real disagreement here, but there might be a framing disagreement. So the second thing that was in that defense of Tinder op-ed is, I think we have this assumption, this worldview, I think almost everyone in the room has this worldview that there's like, well, sometimes you just want to have, sex with someone, and sometimes you really want a long-term relationship with someone. But the evidence that we have suggests that you don't know, right? You don't know what you want. And there's like, it's like, how do we actually date? I call it the unimodel, right? As opposed to there being two different models of how you might want to go about dating. I call it just, there's one, and it goes like this. Boy, he's cute. Would I go out with him? Yeah, I guess so. How was that first date? It was pretty fun. Like, would I be willing to sleep with him? Well, maybe. And what happens if you inadvertently fell in love and made kids and grandkids, and then we're on a porch together? How would that feel? And they'd be like, that sounds good too, right? And so I actually think that is how relationships in the West are developing these days. And there are elements of hookup culture, and maybe this is where I think we would agree, that are a concern to me. But I'm not troubled if people want to start relationships by getting into bed soon. That's actually a reasonable way to start assessing compatibility and how much time is appropriate. Like, I don't think we figured it out, and there's a lot of individual variation on how quickly you do that stuff.
What do you think?
I actually, interestingly enough, I don't disagree with you. I think, obviously what I was saying backstage, and we didn't actually get a chance to finish this, and I think we touched on this earlier, is that when you give people a platform to treat each other with kindness and respect, they rise to the occasion. That doesn't mean that you cannot date and have one-night stands or do whatever you want. Bumble is, like, for example, I mean, that's the only thing I have any relative knowledge on is Bumble in terms of online dating, but you can do that on Bumble. It's whatever makes you feel, like, we are all about female and male empowerment. It's whatever makes you feel empowered. If it makes you feel empowered to sleep with somebody on a first date, there's no judgment from us on that. It's just creating a platform that is centered around kindness and respect.
Esther, last words? We're out of time. Give me your take on that.
The one thing when you talked earlier that I would have said, when you said, you can be in the line at Whole Foods, and there is a message that happens to come, and you may have missed that message. Did you say that?
Oh, I I was saying you could miss meeting somebody like at the bar, at the sushi bar, or at the coffee bar because you're on your phone.
Strangers in the night.
Then I misheard you. I think all what we are talking about, one of the things that is really important here is relationships are filled with ambiguity. And from the moment they were taken out of a strict code of duty and obligation that was very codified, they became much more murky. And that ability to straddle these nuances is the art of the day.
Thank you guys so much.
The art of the day.